Here, this beautiful Royal Lancaster Hotel, set in the heart of London, scholars from all over the world gather together for the 3rd International Conference of the Unity of the Sciences, sponsored by the International Cultural Foundation. The conference series was initiated in 1972 by the Reverend Dr. Sun Myung Moon to bring together scholars, distinguished scholars, from all over the world. This film, made during the actual conference, begins with the opening ceremony.
I think it's an index of the imagination of the organizers of this conference to have brought in this extremely fascinating but perhaps somewhat enigmatic gathering a discussion on these two topics, science and absolute value. Assured, therefore, as we are of the importance of the topic and of the scientific status of this meeting, we shall start by well, it's not, I think, for me to declare this conference open. We shall, with this meeting, inaugurate our conference. Dr. Moon founded the International Cultural Foundation in Japan in 1968 and initiated this conference, or this series of conferences, as part of the program of that foundation. He has come specially from New York today for the opening of this, and it gives me the greatest pleasure to call upon the founder, Reverend Dr. Moon, to give the founder's address.
Honorable Chairman, distinguished scientists, eminent press and scholars, I deeply welcome all of you who are attending the 3rd International Conference on the Unity of Sciences, sponsored by the International Foundation. As I'm sure I am aware, 2 previous conferences have been held. The first in New York in November 1972, and in Tokyo in November 1973. As a founder of the International Cultural Foundation, I have desired and done my best and create and maintain throughout this conference an atmosphere in which an open and unreserved exchange of opinions could take place. And I have been greatly pleased with the fruitful result of these conferences and the participants who have contributed so much to them. At the present time, more and more serious programs continue to develop and confront mankind. The solutions to these challenging problems call for and indeed require impartial and local approaches and ideals, but rather a global approach and the wisdom and knowledge of the many distinguished scholars gathered here at this conference. As a scientist myself, I have been observing with keen interest the debate of science and technology. I know that science and technology and what we call the scientific method have had a far-reaching impact in human life. The development of science and technology raise issues that invite us to seriously reflect on what is essential for us to remain human and to preserve human in our lives. I strongly believe that all this can be made possible only when every field of scientific technology is mobilized for the benefit of mankind. And when a cooperative spirit of human activity is available for the part of the men who handle the scientific technology. I ardently and expect the answers to come from you. This will surely be realized by assembling the results of your respective researches. Your opinion and wisdom. From the very bottom of my heart, I beg you to play the role of the bridge that will connect and lead the present world to the higher dimension and absolute value. Thank you for your attentive listening.
The conference is privileged this morning to have the presence of Lord Adrian. Lord Adrian is a distinguished physiologist, a Nobel laureate, Chancellor of Cambridge University. It's an honor to call upon him now to give his greetings at this inauguration.
Before we speak on more controversial issues, I must tell Dr. Moon how glad we have been to listen to him at this meeting and how much he has given us to learn, both about our professional calling as scientists and of our obligation as members of the human community. I can assure him that we shall try to find out whatever answers are possible for the scientists to give about the human but not material aspects of knowledge and truth. Thank you, Dr. Moon, for your initiative as well as for the most interesting talk that you have given us this morning. I've been asked to greet the guests at this international meeting, which deals in the main with recent trends in scientific research and their effect on human society and on human ideals. Most of us here, I believe, would applaud the knowledge our science has gained in the past, but would have it that it has done little to change our nature. It would be idle, perhaps, to hope that a 2 days meeting for discussion of such a subject and such difficult problems can be made by itself to alter the fate of the world. So may I now express our gratitude to Dr. Moon for his presence here and for the address given us, which we shall all study with very great interest and very great profit. Thank you.
The previous conference in this series was held in Turkey. And on that occasion, it was Professor Sawada, Professor of Philosophy at Cairo University, Turkey, who was the chairman. It is as outgoing chairman of the conference that it gives me pleasure to call upon him to extend his greetings to this conference.
I am very much honored to say a word of greeting on the occasion of opening the third international conference on unity of science. The second conference was held in Tokyo last November under the general theme, Modern Science and Moral Values. The main effort of our members of the executive committee at that time was how to make this conference a ground where participants be able to discuss the most urgent problems all human beings are now facing, not from a particular ideology or a particular school of thought, but from every possible academic interest and sincerity. By the word academic, we meant an attitude of a person who can sense the existence of real problems of our time and strong passion to do something in order to solve this vital problem under a well thought out and logically consistent theoretical framework.
It falls to Professor Mellon to take upon himself the onus of speaking to us, or the keynote address. Professor Mellon.
Before starting my class, I should like to thank Dr. Moon and the International Cultural Foundation for making this conference possible, and particularly for inviting me to take part in it, and for landing me in this hot seat on this occasion. We have met together to have a free and frank discussion of a very important and very difficult problem, but one whose solution, we believe, is of prime importance for the future of mankind. We are all here as individuals, able and indeed encouraged to say exactly what we wish without any coercion or censorship of any kind. It will be clear to you all that many of us disagree with each other, both in degree and even fundamentally. Our numbers include scientists of all descriptions and theologians of all complexions, and we are clearly not committed to any branch of science or to any brand of theology. However, we do hope that we can establish some mode of cooperation and communication between ourselves. We also come from many countries. Some of us regret that at this stage not all countries and power blocks in the world are represented here. At some future this wider political coverage will, I hope, be possible. But for the present we have so many points of view represented in our midst that I think criticism of any lack of Catholicism is probably misplaced.
The final sentence of the statement of purpose of this conference indicates the desire that our discussion should be based on purely scientific attitudes. This brings to an end the inauguration ceremony. Thank you very kindly.
The inaugural ceremony was followed by the plenary session under the chairmanship of Professor Mellanby. Professor Mellanby continues.
I will ask Dr. Martin his address. Dr. Martin.
I originally called my talk Science, the Unity of Science and Higher Values, because I find it difficult to attribute any meaning to the phrase absolute values. The population of the world is already almost universally agreed to be growing too fast. I suggest that it is already too large, that much of the trouble in the world is due to the stress caused by excessive numbers of people and too small an amount of elbow room for those who live in crowded conditions. Such considerations naturally lead to the question of influencing the breeding and reproduction of human beings. I have no doubt that it should be undertaken, though preferably by wholly voluntary means.
Professor Martin's speech, being one of the most controversial, drew much comment from the distinguished scientists. It is impossible in this documentary to give other than a brief look at the spirit and freedom of discussion which followed this speech.
Professor Martin, it is those with which absolute values have to do, religion has to do, and to say they don't exist because they are not objective is utter nonsense and leads to conclusions, in my opinion, which are quite unacceptable.
I wonder, just to make his comments a little bit more factual, if Professor Martin could indicate the precise characters of those ancestral survival experiences which were selective for the instincts of Newton's mathematics, Beethoven's symphonies, Leonardo's pictures, and Michelangelo's sculptures, the subsequent expressions.
The use of science, an understanding of science by the society is technology. And I believe very firmly that the decision of what technological use one makes of the understanding of science is the responsibility of the society, and that the main thing that the scientist can do and the place he should stay in is advice to society as the probable consequences of the acts that it considers. Thank you.
Universities have and should also have other tasks more directly coordinated with the needs of society. But higher learning and basic research can successfully be performed by a few adapted for and devoted to this purpose. The choice of them should be severe but made from a broad base. I would like to turn the picture upside down and claim that the common schools, public schools, professional training institutes on different levels, and at last the learned institutes of the universities in this order are ranked according to their importance. Step by step, it should be possible.
In the different profound and sometimes detailed discussions were held by the scholars. We look now briefly at these committees in action.
Then the important variable to consider in the case of social science is knowledge, and I'm defining knowledge very widely in this. In the natural sciences, if we discover some regularity, then our knowledge can be used to get round the sort of constraints that the regularity might have had upon us. For example, it's through using our knowledge of the gravity that we can get to the moon. In social life, however, our knowledge can not only be used to help us through use of the knowledge, it can also result in the relationship itself, or the regularity being changed, as it is the knowledge or knowledge of some kind which in part accounts for the regularities in the first place.
Professor Watkins. Well, Mrs. Barker's paper raises, in connection with social science, an old but still a very serious problem. Causal predictability and rational predictability, and lastly, statistical predictability. With regard to the first two, henceforth I'll shorten these to C predictability, R predictability, and S predictability. Now I can illustrate the difference as far as human context goes between C predictability and R predictability very easily.
All the sciences together, because all depends, the science we mean, one could be put in relation with one or two components of it, but only all the sciences put in generally can be put on the same level as a fact. Thank you.
I think for other reasons than the scientific values, it's goal-oriented, and it is supported only to the extent that it helps, or is supposed to, or thought to, help us to reach those external goals.
Development of notions, mathematics, means of thought which are involved in science itself. And when we start talking with scientists about science, then we don't have any tools of any precision, of any clarity. It is as if we were talking about that for the first time. Somehow it cannot progress. And now, about science, I was asking myself all the time when you were speaking, if you meant by science a knowledge or an exercise.
I would say she has been asking the question whether we were talking about science understood as knowledge or an exercise. As far as my paper goes, in that there is no doubt. Of course it is another thing, it's information. If it is at that point, information is outside the field of value. So she has said rightly, that doing science in order to search for meaning, the meaning of reality, is actually a way of practicing values.
Religious belief and expertise in a way of special profession. To be scientific, generally one has to be objective. When you come to apply the results of social science, you cannot leave out family judgments. It must be decided intrinsically in people's minds as to how much they value the future compared with today. This really brings up the age-old maxim, that is what is the extent by which an individual's income, that is his claim on the community, by the value of his contribution to that scheme. This is a key question in all political systems, in Russia and China and Western democracies. And the answer comes out differently in different
The conference included many social events. Amongst them was a visit to the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, where the participants were able to see a beautiful production of opera. In addition, we held a commemorative banquet where Professor Auger from France, a Nobel laureate, gave a commemorative address. Here, Professor Dr. Lee is meeting Reverend Dr. Moon, and as the many professors come through the party, many of them talk and express their gratitude and thanks for this most wonderful gathering. Professors came from over 30 countries in the world, from every continent. The farewell party was as good-humoured, as happy as the entire conference in whatever session that took place. The professors, I can honestly recall, were amongst the most happy people in London these last 3 days. We had a social side which interacted with the academic side. Here, Dr. Peter Hill from Nottingham University was introduced to the Reverend Dr. Moon and Mrs. Moon. Professor Gordon Dunstan, theologian from King's College London. Unfortunately, we were unable to record all the comments of the many professors. The first conference in New York was naturally much smaller. The second conference in Tokyo had already doubled in size. The third conference in London has attracted over 150 professors from all over the world. The fourth conference next year, to be held in New York, will number over 300 professors and Nobel laureates in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Professors, distinguished, energetic and busy, are prepared to give up 3 days' time to come and discuss the great issues facing the world. The conference staff and preparation was carried out by volunteers associated with the International Cultural Foundation. The smooth running of all these conferences has been a notable feature, warmly appreciated by the many. The conference was organized in such a way that the professors' papers under discussion were circulated before the conference, allowing the maximum of discussion during the conference. This involved the prep of 1.5 tons of literature which was distributed through the conference and before. Professor Thring, who played a notable part in the discussions, is shaking Dr. Moon's hand. Many of the academics, of course, had very interesting and specialized contributions to make. And the examination by scientists of opposing disciplines, as it were, looking at things from entirely different viewpoints, caused much serious thinking and much interesting controversy. All the proceedings were recorded, and these will be later edited and produced in book form, as indeed was the second conference in Tokyo. The International Cultural Foundation maintained a permanent secretariat which is already working on next year's conference. The scale of these conferences is indeed very great, but throughout the organized such that there is an intimate relationship between scholars, freedom of discussion. Many informal talks have led to the most interesting of ideas. The participants are invited to comment, to criticize, to make suggestions for the next conference. The Secretariat will be presenting all these new viewpoints to the academic advisors, and the academics will be judging them, sifting them out, and producing an even better conference in New York. Professor St. Georges here, Nobel laureate from the United States, expressing his gratitude. He is, incidentally, a physiologist. The academics gathered here share Reverend Dr. Moon's desire that we build a world of beauty and harmony. To better the quality of life remains the motivating force behind this great endeavor.